Most people walking through the shops around Jackson Square don't even realize there's a house museum right here, one that lets you step straight into mid-19th century New Orleans. And even fewer people realize that this entire square, the buildings, the layout, the life happening here, wouldn't exist the way it does today if it weren't for one woman. A woman who survived an attempted murder, returned to New Orleans, and reshaped this space through sheer determination. Today, we're learning a little about who that woman was and stepping inside one of the buildings she brought to life, and some of the early design choices that defined New Orleans as the city was taking shape. Hi, I'm Allie, and welcome back to Fab Little Dish, where we celebrate vintage homes, historic interiors, and the stories that keep those places alive. If you love historic house tours, hit that thumbs up button, and let's head on over to New Orleans. When you first walk into the 1850 house, you actually enter through a gift shop, and you'd never guess this space was once part of the most influential residential buildings in the city. And that story begins here, with the woman who made this building and much of what's surrounding it possible. The 1850 house sits inside the Pontalba Buildings, commissioned by Michaela Almonaster de Pontalba, one of the most powerful and complicated women in 19th century New Orleans. Born in New Orleans in 1795, Michaela inherited immense wealth and property through her family, and she used it in a way that very few women could of her time. The Baroness spent her early adulthood in France after entering an arranged marriage to a French aristocrat, a union that quickly became turbulent. It ended in a shocking act of violence when her father-in-law shot her 4 times at close range before taking his own life. She survived, separated from her husband, and ultimately made the decision to return home to New Orleans. What she did next reshaped the city. She financed and oversaw the construction of the 2 massive Pontalba buildings facing Jackson Square, creating what were at the time some of the most fashionable and modern residences in New Orleans. These weren't single-family homes, but elegant apartments designed for affluent Creole families, merchants, and professionals. After returning to New Orleans, the Baroness came back with a very clear vision, one shaped by years spent in Paris and a deep appreciation for European urban design. Rather than restore what already stood along the square, she made a bold decision. She tore down the existing buildings entirely and replaced them with what we now know as the Pontalba Buildings. Accompanying her was her youngest son, Gaston de Pontalba, who spent the next several years documenting the city around him. Through sketches and watercolors, Gaston captured daily life, architecture, and the changing streets of New Orleans with remarkable detail. Most fascinating of all, he documented his mother's own building projects as they were taking shape, including views of the row houses under construction. These drawings give us a rare, almost behind-the-scenes look at New Orleans as it was being shaped in real time. She initially hired James Gallier in 1849 to produce the first architectural sketches, which is especially interesting considering we just visited the Gallier house a few weeks ago on the channel. But it seems their working relationship didn't last. Surviving contracts still use Gallier's drawings, yet his name is scratched out and replaced with the word null. The Baroness clashed with more than one professional on the project, and in the end, she largely oversaw the work herself. Contemporary accounts even describe her showing up at the construction site in men's work clothes, climbing ladders, and personally inspecting progress, something almost unheard of for a woman of her status to do in the mid-19th century. When the upper and lower Pontalba buildings opened, newspapers praised their beauty and civic importance. Their cast iron galleries were believed to be some of the first kind installed in New Orleans. These would go on to shape the visual identity of the city. Even the ironwork you see throughout the buildings carries her mark. AP appear in the cast iron balconies, a subtle but lasting signature of her control and vision over the design and construction. Later that same year, the Baroness left New Orleans for the final time, returning to France more than a century and a half later, but she forever left her mark on New Orleans. The 1850 house recreates what one of those upper floor residences would have looked like around the mid-19th century, at a moment when New Orleans was starting to thrive. So when we walk through this house, we're not just touring an interior. We're stepping into a part of New Orleans history shaped by a woman who was determined to leave her mark on New Orleans and be remembered for helping to shape its beautiful image that we all know today. And with that, let's step inside the 1850 house. When the Baroness built these homes, they were incredibly modern for the time. Each residence was equipped with gas lighting, indoor plumbing, and water access, things that were still considered luxuries in the mid-19th century. Tenants were even encouraged to finish their interiors to their own tastes, choosing their own wallpapers, lighting fixtures, and details that reflected their own style, customizing each apartment to the residents' tastes and styles. Paint analysis done in the 1970s revealed that these spaces were originally quite restrained. White lime-washed walls, light gray ceilings, and wallpaper used specifically in rooms meant for entertaining. It's a reminder that this wasn't just about beauty, it was about innovation, comfort, and presenting a very modern idea of urban living. We're now stepping into the dining room, which has been decorated for a mid-19th century Christmas. But beneath the seasonal styling, the room tells a very specific story about daily life here in the 1850s. According to the interpretation in this space, residents would have dined using hand-painted Old Paris porcelain and New Orleans silver, illuminated by candlelight and gasolier overhead. Originally, the walls of the dining room were covered in wallpaper rather than paint, a common choice at the time. For formal meals, enslaved people or servants brought food upstairs from the kitchen, which was located at the rear of the courtyard. The separation between preparation and presentation was intentional. Guests experienced the finished ritual of the meal, while the labor that made it possible happened out of sight. And also having kitchens outside was a way to prevent fires from happening indoors. And here we have the adjoining parlor, which is also decorated for a 19th century Christmas, when celebrations were intimate, handmade, and centered around gathering rather than the electric spectacle we all have today. This would have been a room filled with music, conversation, card games, needlework, and all of the quiet rituals of family life. The furniture reflects that era beautifully. Much of it originated in or around New Orleans, and because the residents here were tenants rather than one permanent family, the parlor represents something broader, a snapshot of prosperity, taste, and daily life during the 1850s, rather than just a single household story. This entire building has a life, with many people coming in and out of it. You'll notice some revival styles popular at the time, Rococo, Empire influences, Gothic revival touches here and there, all coexisting in one room. That mix wasn't accidental. It reflects how people actually lived, collecting pieces over time, favoring craftsmanship, ornament, and comfort. And of course, with all of the families coming in and out of these places, that also brought in different styles and tastes. Originally, the walls here would have been covered in wallpaper, adding even more texture and warmth to the space. The museum does have the walls blank here so that we can envision the comparison. With the Christmas decor layered in, the citrus, greenery, candles, and handmade elements, it's easy to imagine this room glowing in the evenings, filled with music, laughter, and candlelight. This is the main bedroom, which gives us one of the clearest glimpses into how these rooms actually looked like when people lived here during the 1850s. When the Cammack family resided here between 1853 and 1856, this arrangement closely reflected the original layout of their home. Records suggest that Amelia Cammack, a widow, likely occupied the largest bedroom at the rear of the house, positioned to overlook the courtyard below. It would have been a quieter, more private space tucked away from the activity of the street. Interestingly, when other tenants lived here, this room wasn't always used as a bedroom. At times, it functioned as a private sitting room, a reminder that spaces in the 19th century were often flexible, adapting to the needs of each household. The furniture here definitely stands out. The rosewood suite with lemon wood accents reflects the strong French influence in New Orleans at the time. Pieces like this were sold along Royal Street in the years just before the Civil War. And look at this huge bed, which is both practical and elegant. It anchors the room with a sense of quiet formality. Above the mantel hangs a portrait of the original owner of the furniture suite, who used these very pieces in her own Royal Street home. Seeing all the pieces here helps root the room not just into a period, but into real life, one that unfolded within the rhythm of the mid-19th century in New Orleans. One of the panels here focuses on the enslaved people and servants whose labor made daily life in this building possible. According to census records, most households in the lower Pontalba buildings relied on enslaved labor, and many also employed live-in servants. These individuals filled every role imaginable: cooks, housekeepers, gardeners, carriage drivers, waiters, personal attendants, working long days from dawn until dusk. Although urban enslavement sometimes allowed for slightly more autonomy than plantation life, it was still a life defined by control. Most enslaved workers lived in small rear rooms separated from the main living spaces, a layout that reflects how the building itself was designed to maintain hierarchy and distance. The children's bedroom reminds us that this house wasn't just a place of formality and entertaining, it was a family home. According to the records, Mrs. Cammack lived here with her 3 young daughters, Gertrude, Kate, and Amelia, and this place would have been their nursery. The room is filled with children's toys, a 19th century children's walker, and furniture made locally here in New Orleans. The labeled dresser and half-tester bed were crafted by William McCracken, a cabinet maker originally from Ireland, grounding this room not just in family life, but in the city's immigrant craftsmanship as well. What's striking is how familiar it all feels. The small scale, the simple furniture, the sense of routine. It's a quiet reminder that childhood existed here alongside history, shaped by the same walls that witness prosperity, loss, and change. And this right here is the gentleman's bedroom, which connects to the main bedroom, a layout choice that immediately tells us something about how these rooms function together as a private family suite. This space is furnished in a more masculine late Empire style with heavier proportions, darker woods, and cleaner lines. It's believed this room might have belonged to Thomas Cammack, Amelia Cammack's son, who was in his 20s when the family moved into this building. The furniture here reflects that transition into adulthood, formal, restrained, and very much of its time. The mahogany bed and matching dresser with mirror date to the 1840s and were purchased locally in New Orleans, possibly just right outside on the street. Between the two windows hangs a portrait of Jenny Lind, the famed Swedish opera singer who stayed across Jackson Square during her 1851 American tour. Even the savvy businesswoman, Madame Pontalba, used Lind's support to draw attention to her newly built townhouses. And once Lind departed, the furnishings were promptly auctioned off. It's a reminder that these homes weren't just places to live, but carefully managed investments. Stepping out into the courtyard, you really start to understand how this house worked day to day. The space wasn't decorative, it was functional. It connected the kitchen, laundry, and service areas, and it's where much of the hardest labor took place. Cooking in the 1850s was an all-day, physically demanding job that began before dawn and stretched well past dusk. Meals were prepared over a cast-iron coal stove, with kettles constantly filled and reheated for cooking, cleaning, and bathing. After breakfast, the cook would head to the nearby market for fresh meat, fish, and vegetables, returning by mid-morning to prepare the main meal of the day, typically served in the early afternoon. The kitchen itself would have been unbearably hot, especially in the New Orleans summers. Imagine the coal stove blazing over a 95-degree humid day. This was back-breaking work done right here on the property. As we move into the service wing, sometimes referred to as the kitchen building, we start to see much of the labor that kept this house running. Courtyard design almost served as more controlled purpose. It allowed owners to closely manage movement between workspaces while keeping living quarters separate. Many enslaved workers and servants lived in small rear rooms off this courtyard, reinforcing both physical and social boundaries within the home. Standing here, it's impossible not to think about the lives that powered this house. The labor that kept the meals on the table, the rooms clean, the daily life running smoothly. It's a quiet but important reminder that these beautiful homes didn't function on their own. They relied entirely on the people who lived and worked behind the scenes. As we leave the 1850 house, it's clear this isn't just a beautiful historic apartment that's been frozen in time. It's a layered portrait of a mid-19th century life. From the formal rooms designed to impress, to the bedrooms tucked away for family and guests, to the service spaces and courtyard where the real work of daily life unfolded. What makes this place so inspiring is that it all exists because of one woman. The Baroness de Pontalba didn't just decorate this space, she financed it, controlled the design of it, and ended up shaping the style of how Jackson Square would look and all of the French Quarter. She's an incredibly influential woman. Her determination and her eye for design ended up shaping the style of one of the cities we all love so very much today. I hope you all enjoyed this tour of the 1850s house in New Orleans. Thank you so much for stepping inside this remarkable space with me. Please make sure to give this video a thumbs up and hit subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the historic house tours that are coming your way. Until the next one, my friends, keep enjoying the beauty of vintage home. Au revoir.